During what was supposed to be a family vacation at an upscale resort, my daughter-in-law publicly humiliated me in the grand lobby. "We've cancelled the old woman's room," she announced loudly. "She can sleep in the trash where she belongs." The crowd erupted in laughter at my expense. Without a word, I walked calmly to the reception desk and placed a distinctive gold card on the marble counter. When the general manager recognized me, every face in that lobby drained of color. "It's an honor to have you here, Mrs. Thornton," he said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. "Follow my story to its conclusion, and tell me which city you're reading from. I'm curious to see how far this tale will travel." I was 61 years old, and I never imagined that one of my life's most devastating moments would unfold before a lobby full of strangers at a luxury resort. We had been driving for nearly 4 hours. My son, David Thornton, gripped the steering wheel with focused determination. His wife, Fiona, occupied the passenger seat, while I sat squeezed in the back with my 2 grandchildren. I had anticipated this trip for months, ever since David casually mentioned during a phone call that they were planning a spring break getaway to Crestview Lodge. Something in my chest flickered with hope that I should have immediately extinguished. "Fiona said there's room for you," David had mentioned. What she actually said was, "I suppose your mother can tag along if she really insists," delivered in that particular tone I knew all too well, the one that transformed every invitation into a reluctant concession, every gesture into an undeserved favor. But I accepted. Of course I accepted. During the drive, Fiona complained incessantly about the traffic congestion, the oppressive heat, and David's choice of radio station. When one of the children timidly asked if we could stop for a bathroom break, she sighed as though she'd been asked to scale Mount Everest. "We'll be there in 30 minutes, she snapped, irritation dripping from every syllable. David remained silent. He always remained silent. I stared out the window, attempting to cultivate excitement, trying to convince myself that this time would be different, that perhaps, just perhaps, we could function as a genuine family for a few precious days. Crestview Lodge materialized before us like something torn from a glossy travel magazine. Pristine white stone walls, meticulously manicured gardens, and an impressive fountain at the main entrance greeted us. The parking lot showcased an array of luxury vehicles, Mercedes-Benzes, BMWs, and several Teslas gleaming in the sunlight. David maneuvered our modest sedan among them, and for one fleeting moment, I felt like I belonged to something special. We entered the lobby, and the air conditioning washed over me like a blessing after the car's stifling heat. The interior proved even more impressive than the exterior. Soaring ceilings supported magnificent crystal chandeliers, while marble floors polished to such perfection that you could see your reflection walking across them. Elegant families queued at the check-in desk. Staff members moved with silent efficiency, and the gentle murmur of conversations blended harmoniously with instrumental music floating through the space. I lagged behind as David and Fiona approached the reception counter. The children darted toward a decorative fountain in the waiting area. I clutched my small rolling suitcase, suddenly feeling conspicuously out of place in my simple floral dress and comfortable walking shoes. Fiona conversed with the young receptionist, a woman with dark hair pulled into a flawless bun. I observed her checking something on the computer, watched Fiona nod approvingly, and saw David sign several documents. Everything appeared normal, routine, unremarkable. Then Fiona turned toward me. There was a specific glint in her eyes that I recognized immediately, the same look she wore right before delivering one of her innocent comments, the kind that sounded like harmless jokes but left bruises that persisted for days. She approached me with deliberate, measured steps, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The lobby bustled with activity, families awaiting their turn, employees transporting luggage, guests comfortably settled on leather sofas. And Fiona raised her voice. She didn't shout, but she spoke loud enough that everyone within earshot turned their heads. "We've cancelled your room, Brenda." I froze. The words didn't register immediately. I waited for David to interject, to correct her, to explain there had been some mistake. But he simply stared at the floor, hands buried deep in his pockets. Fiona continued, her voice growing louder, clearer, more deliberate. "We're not going to waste money on a room for you. You can sleep in the garbage bin. It's what you deserve." Laughter erupted around me. I heard it, not from everyone, but from enough people to make my stomach turn. An older gentleman in a cashmere sweater released a choked chuckle. A younger woman whispered something to her companion, and they both smirked. Even the receptionist looked down uncomfortably, as if witnessing this spectacle was simply part of her job description. And my son, my only son, the child I had raised, the one I had fed and clothed and comforted through nightmares, he laughed. It wasn't a loud, boisterous laugh. It was nervous, soft, uncertain. But I heard it clearly, and somehow that made it infinitely worse than any roar of mockery could have been. The children didn't understand what was happening. My 9-year-old grandson, Jake, looked at me with confused eyes. "Grandma, are you going to sleep with us?" Fiona yanked his arm roughly. "Quiet, sweetie. The adults are talking." Heat rose through my body, first to my chest, then climbing up my neck to my cheeks. It wasn't merely shame. It was something deeper, more visceral, a toxic mixture of humiliation, betrayal, and pain so sharp I could barely draw breath. The chandelier lights seemed blindingly bright. The murmur of conversations became a distant, meaningless buzz. My legs trembled beneath me. For one terrible second, I considered turning around and simply walking out, calling a taxi, heading to the bus station, disappearing from their lives as they clearly wished. But something inside me shifted in that crucial instant. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was clarity. For years, I had tolerated Fiona's cutting comments, the petty cruelties, the convenient forgetfulness when it came to including me in family events. The Christmases where there wasn't room in the car to pick me up. The children's birthday parties where the invitation arrived the day after the celebration had ended. And my son, my David, never said a word. Never defended me. He always found an excuse, a justification, a way to minimize what his wife did. And I had allowed it. I permitted it because they were my family. Because I didn't want to create conflict. Because I feared losing them completely. But standing in the middle of that luxurious lobby, with strangers regarding me with pity or amusement, I realized something profound. I had lost them long ago. I inhaled deeply. My hands stopped shaking. I adjusted the handle of my suitcase and walked purposefully toward the reception desk. I didn't look at Fiona. I didn't look at David. I walked with my spine straight and my steps firm, even though inside I felt like I was crumbling into dust. The receptionist regarded me with a cautious, uncertain expression. "Ma'am, may I help you?" I reached into my handbag and extracted a card. It wasn't an ordinary credit card. It was heavy, with a particular sheen that caught the lobby lights in a distinctive way. I placed it on the marble counter without uttering a word. The receptionist took it gingerly. Her eyes widened dramatically. She looked at the card, then at me, then back at the card again. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid it through the reader. "Mrs. Thornton," she whispered, her face draining of color. We didn't know you were coming. Excuse me. We have no record of your arrival." Behind me, the silence became absolute. I could feel countless eyes drilling into my back. The receptionist typed frantically on her computer, her movements nervous and hurried. "One moment, please. I'm going to summon the general manager immediately." And then he arrived. A distinguished man in an impeccable suit, with perfectly coiffed gray hair, emerged rapidly from a side office. His expression transformed from professional courtesy to something approaching reverence when his eyes found me. "Mrs. Thornton." His voice resonated through the entire lobby. He rushed toward me with evident urgency. "We had absolutely no idea you would be gracing us with your presence. Your name is on our list of resort owners." The world seemed to stop rotating. Owners. I heard a choked gasp behind me. I knew precisely who it was. The manager, Robert, according to his nameplate, continued speaking, but I could barely focus on his words. Something about the presidential suite, special arrangements, the entire staff being at my complete disposal. My heart pounded, not from nervousness, but from a strange amalgamation of relief and profound sorrow. I turned around slowly. David had gone completely pale, drained of all color. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly, as if he desperately wanted to speak, but the words remained lodged in his throat. Fiona, conversely, wore an expression of pure, unadulterated shock frozen on her face. Her green eyes, typically so calculating and sharp, now reflected something I had never witnessed in them before. Fear. The children tugged at their father's sleeve, asking questions he couldn't possibly answer. The people who had laughed moments earlier now observed us with awkward curiosity. Some murmured among themselves. Others simply stared, waiting to witness what would unfold next. Mrs. Thornton. Robert gently touched my arm. Shall we escort your luggage to your suite immediately? We have champagne on ice, and our chef can prepare anything your heart desires for dinner. I nodded silently, still not trusting my voice. Perfect. He paused, then glanced at David and Fiona with a neutral, professionally distant expression, though something in his eyes suggested recognition. He had witnessed the entire scene. And your companions? He inquired carefully. They have their own reservation, I said finally. My voice emerged firmer than I expected. They will not be accompanying me. Robert nodded with understanding. Of course. If you require anything at all, simply dial 0 from your suite. He gestured to a young bellhop. Please escort Mrs. Thornton to the presidential suite. As the bellhop took possession of my suitcase, David took a hesitant step forward. Mom, we need to talk. I looked at him. I truly looked at him, not at the memory of the boy he had been, but at the man standing before me. I saw a 37-year-old adult, not the child from my memories. I noticed the lines etched around his eyes, the gray beginning to appear at his temples, the slightly hunched posture of someone carrying an invisible but substantial weight. But more than anything, I saw a stranger. Someone who resembled my son but had ceased to be him long ago. Not now, David. But Mom, I don't understand. How? Why didn't you ever tell us? Later, I said simply, and followed the bellhop toward the elevators. The presidential suite occupied the 15th floor. The bellhop made polite conversation during the ascent, mentioning various amenities, restaurant hours, and the location of the spa. I nodded without truly listening. My mind inhabited another time, another place. When the suite door closed behind me, I could finally breathe properly. The room was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking mountain view. Elegant furniture filled the space. A full kitchen gleamed in one corner. There was even a baby grand piano positioned artfully near the windows. Fresh flowers arranged in crystal vases perfumed the air. A bottle of champagne chilled on ice, as the manager had promised, and gourmet chocolates rested temptingly on the coffee table. I collapsed onto the blue velvet sofa and closed my eyes. The truth was infinitely more complicated than anyone could imagine. 15 years ago, when my husband Raymond Thornton passed away, he left me substantially more than anyone knew. Raymond had been a quiet, diligent man, the kind of person who went unnoticed in crowds. We had lived modestly, never displaying wealth, never drawing attention to ourselves. But Raymond had been remarkably astute about investments. When he died, I discovered we possessed nearly $2 million in various assets, properties, stocks, bonds. And this resort, Crestview Lodge, had been one of his final investments. He had purchased a 30% stake when the property was still under construction, betting confidently that it would evolve into a successful luxury destination. He was right. After his death, I faced difficult decisions. David was 22 then, freshly graduated from college, brimming with ideas about helping me manage the finances. Fiona, whom he had been dating for merely 6 months, attended every conversation, every family meeting, offering unsolicited suggestions. I remember one particular evening vividly. We sat at the kitchen table in my old house, reviewing documents. David wore that serious expression he adopted when attempting to seem mature and authoritative. "Mom, I think you should let me handle this. It's complicated financial stuff. I don't want you to stress yourself or make costly mistakes." Mistakes? As if 40 years of marriage and managing a household hadn't taught me anything about money management. Fiona sat beside him, nodding with a concerned expression that now seems transparently false. "It's an overwhelming amount to process, Brenda. David simply wants to take care of you properly. Perhaps it would be better if he managed the accounts and investments. You could just relax, enjoy your fixed income." Fixed income, as if I were a helpless elderly woman incapable of understanding basic finances. But I nodded. I allowed them to believe they would handle everything. I showed them a few accounts, a few documents, just enough to satisfy their curiosity, and kept the rest entirely to myself. The largest investments, the properties, the business stakes, including this resort, remained my secret. Why did I do it? Initially, I didn't fully understand my own motivations. There was something about the way they spoke to me, the way they automatically assumed my incompetence, that triggered a protective instinct. I wanted to safeguard what Raymond and I had built together. Then, as months transformed into years, it became something different. It became a test. I wanted to observe who they truly were when they believed I had nothing to offer except my presence. I wanted to discover if they loved me as a mother or merely tolerated me as an obligation. The answer arrived slowly, painfully, over many years. David and Fiona married 1 year after Raymond's death. They didn't request any assistance with the wedding. Fiona claimed her parents would handle all arrangements. I assumed they simply wanted complete control over the details. Years later, a cousin casually mentioned that Fiona had told people it wasn't worth asking Brenda for financial help because she barely had enough to survive on her modest fixed income, the income they assumed constituted my entire financial situation. When the children were born, I tried desperately to be present. I offered to babysit, to help, to be the grandmother I longed to be. But there were always excuses. Fiona was busy with her routine. The children had too many scheduled activities. It wasn't a convenient time for visitors. They invited me for Christmas, but always with that tone. "I suppose you can come if you don't have other plans," as if it were a favor they grudgingly extended, as if my presence were burdens they endured out of obligation. And the birthdays. God, the birthdays. David never forgot Fiona's birthday. Flowers, elegant dinners, expensive gifts materialized like clockwork. My 60th birthday last year passed without a single phone call. When I finally called 3 days later, David said, "I'm so sorry, Mom. Work has been absolutely insane. It completely slipped my mind." Fiona's surprise party had occurred 2 weeks earlier. 40 guests. Live music. A 3-tiered cake that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I swallowed the pain again and again and again. But somewhere deep inside, a part of me registered every slight, every omission, every time they chose to exclude me. That part grew steadily, solidifying into something cold and crystalline. They were not my family. They were my failed examination. The sweet phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. I ignored it. It rang 3 more times before falling silent. Then my cell phone began vibrating insistently. "David." I ignored the calls. Then another. And another. Finally, a text message appeared. "Mom, please. We need to talk. We're waiting for you in the lobby restaurant." I stared at the message for a long time. Then slowly, deliberately, I typed a response. "Meet me in the restaurant at 7 p.m. Just you and Fiona. The children should stay with the hotel's childcare service. Dinner was scheduled in 2 hours. I took a long, luxurious shower, allowing the hot water to dissolve the tension that had accumulated in my shoulders. I dressed in an elegant navy blue outfit I had purchased months ago but never worn. The cut flattered me better than I remembered. I styled my hair carefully and applied subtle makeup. When I examined my reflection in the mirror, I saw something I hadn't witnessed in years. I saw a woman who didn't apologize for existing. I descended to the restaurant precisely at 7 o'clock. The establishment was beautiful, dimly lit, with flickering candles on every table and the gentle symphony of clinking glasses and silverware. I spotted David and Fiona at a corner table. David appeared agitated, nervously swirling wine in his glass. Fiona wore that expression I knew intimately, forced control, lips pressed into a tight line, hands on the table with fingers interlocked too tightly to appear natural. I sat across from them without speaking. A waiter materialized immediately, filling my water glass and presenting the menu with a flourish. I ordered without examining the options, keeping my eyes fixed on my son. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, David shattered it. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell us?" I took a measured sip of water before responding. "Tell you what, exactly? That you own this place. That you have money. All this time, we thought you were barely surviving on Dad's modest fixed income." "I never said that," I replied calmly. "You assumed it." Fiona leaned forward aggressively, her voice controlled but strained. "You made us look like absolute fools out there, in front of all those people." I met her gaze directly. For the first time in 15 years, I held eye contact without flinching away. "No," I said softly but firmly. "You made yourselves look exactly like what you are." Fiona recoiled as though I had physically struck her. David's mouth fell open, but no sound emerged. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, placing them carefully before withdrawing discreetly. No one touched their plate. "I don't understand," David finally managed, his voice trembling with emotion. "If you had money, if you had all this, why did you let us think you were poor? That I was a burden?" I finished for him. "That I needed your pity?" I picked up my fork, cutting a piece of salmon with precise, deliberate movements. "Because I wanted to observe something." "Observe what?" Fiona practically spat the words. I chewed slowly, savoring the exquisite food they hadn't even tasted. "I wanted to see if you loved me without expecting anything in return. I wanted to know if I held any value to you beyond what I could provide materially." David shook his head, appearing genuinely confused. "Mom, we've always loved you. Always." The words would have moved me years ago. Now they rang hollow, empty. "Did you?" I asked softly, my tone almost conversational. "Like when you excluded me from Christmas dinner 3 years ago because there wasn't room in the car." I checked the rental records later. You had rented a 7-passenger SUV, and there were only 5 of you. David blinked rapidly, searching for words. "Or my 60th birthday last year," I continued, my voice remaining calm and measured. "Not a single call, not one text message. But 2 weeks prior, you spent $5,000 on Fiona's surprise party." "I called you afterward," David protested weakly. 3 days afterward, I corrected, taking a sip of wine. "And only after I called you first. Your excuse was that you were busy with work." Fiona leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with barely contained anger. "This is absolutely ridiculous. You're acting like a resentful child, keeping score of every insignificant mistake we've made." "Insignificant mistake?" I repeated, placing my fork on the plate with a soft clink. "Fiona, in 15 years, you've invited me to your house exactly 11 times." I had counted. And of those 11 occasions, 6 were because you needed me to watch the children while you went out. That's not a relationship. That's a convenience. That's not fair, David interjected. We lead busy, complicated lives, Mom. We have significant responsibilities. I know, I nodded. That's precisely why I never complained. That's why I always said yes when you needed something. I watched the children when they had the flu and you had that important conference, remember? I stayed awake for 3 consecutive nights. When you returned, you didn't even ask how they were doing. You simply said, thanks, and went directly to bed. Silence returned to the table, heavier than before. I could see David processing memories, his face contracting with each recollection. Or when your washing machine broke down, I continued, now addressing Fiona directly. I offered you money to repair it. You said you didn't need charity from anyone. But 2 weeks later, you asked David to purchase a new one for you. He withdrew $3,000 from his emergency fund. Fiona's lips pursed into a thin, defensive line. We didn't know you could afford. Exactly, I interrupted sharply. You didn't know because you never asked. You assumed I was poor, that I was a nuisance, that my only function was to be available when you needed me and to disappear completely when you didn't. David ran both hands through his hair, a gesture he'd made since childhood when overwhelmed. Mom, if you had just told us. What? My voice rose for the first time, not much, but enough that nearby tables turned to look. I immediately lowered my tone. If I had told you I possessed money, you would have treated me differently. Tell me, David, does that reality make this situation better or worse? David couldn't answer. I took another sip of wine, feeling its warmth travel down my throat. When your father died, you two came to my house every single week, remember? Helping with paperwork, with bank calls, with everything imaginable. I paused deliberately. But as soon as you thought everything was settled, as soon as you assumed I only had a basic fixed income and nothing more to offer, the visits became less frequent. First every 2 weeks, then once monthly, then only during holidays, and then not even that. We had the children, Fiona protested defensively. We had a life to build. I know, I nodded. And I never asked to be the center of your universe. I only asked not to be forgotten completely. David took a deep, shuddering breath, his eyes watering. Mom, I didn't realize. I didn't know you felt this way. I didn't look directly at him. Not once did you notice that your wife spoke of me as though I were a burden. Not once did you wonder why your mother spent every single holiday alone. He fell silent, unable to formulate a response. I turned my attention to Fiona. Last Christmas, your sister posted photographs of your family dinner on Facebook. I saw all of you, 20 people gathered around that massive table. David's family, yours, friends. I was a 15-minute drive away. I ate a turkey sandwich alone in front of the television. You told us you had other plans, Fiona said defensively. I lied. I stated simply. Because I knew the invitation was extended out of obligation, not because you genuinely wanted me there. I placed my napkin on the table with finality. And the truth, Fiona, is that I preferred being alone to enduring another dinner where you treated me like furniture, present but invisible, tolerated but not welcomed. That's completely unfair, she hissed. I've always been civil to you. Civil. I released a humorless laugh. Fiona, you told your mother I was difficult to please. I heard you with my own ears. I was in the bathroom at your house during Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. You two were in the kitchen. You said I was critical and demanding, that I always found something to complain about. Fiona's face paled noticeably. I've never complained, I continued quietly but firmly. Not about your cooking. not about how you raise your children, not about anything. But you needed to paint me as the villain to justify how you treated me. I stood from the table with deliberate grace. So no, I wasn't the one who made you look like fools this afternoon. You accomplished that entirely by yourselves. Wait! David stood as well, his chair scraping loudly. You can't just leave. We have to fix this somehow. There's nothing to fix, David. You showed me exactly who you are for 15 consecutive years, and I finally believed you. So what? Fiona's voice became shrill, desperate. Are you going to punish us? Disinherit us? Was this entire charade just to humiliate us? I looked at her with a mixture of pity and exhaustion. No, Fiona. I'm not going to punish you. I don't need to. You're already living with the consequences of your choices. I'm simply refusing to continue living with them myself. Mom, please. David caught up to me, gently grasping my arm. His touch was tender, almost pleading. Give me a chance to fix this. Just tell me what to do. I looked at him carefully. I saw genuine tears in his eyes. I saw authentic regret etched on his face. But I also saw something else, something that made my decision clear. I saw a 37-year-old man who had just realized his mother possessed money and that he had wasted years of potential benefits. I don't want you to fix anything, I said softly, freeing my arm from his grasp. I just want you to leave me in peace. I returned to my suite with a heart that felt simultaneously heavy and unburdened, a mind that was finally blessedly clear. The room phone began ringing 20 minutes later. I disconnected it from the wall. My cell phone vibrated constantly with incoming messages. I silenced them all. I poured myself a generous glass of wine from the minibar and stepped out onto the balcony. The nighttime view of the mountains was absolutely breathtaking. Flickering lights from distant homes, stars shining brilliantly in the clear sky, cool air filling my lungs with each breath. For the first time in 15 years, I felt light. The next morning, I descended to the restaurant early. I ordered a leisurely breakfast, savored fresh coffee and toast with homemade jam, and read the newspaper an employee courteously brought to my table. It was almost normal, almost peaceful, until David appeared. He looked terrible, swollen eyes, wrinkled clothes, as though he hadn't slept a single moment. He sat across from me without requesting permission. I didn't sleep at all last night, he said, his voice hoarse and strained. I've been thinking, remembering. And you're right, Mom. About everything. I continued eating my breakfast without responding. Fiona and I fought intensely. She claims you're overreacting, that you're being manipulative. But he rubbed his hands over his face roughly. I started remembering things. Things I had ignored, things I let slide because confronting Fiona was easier to avoid than address. I took a measured sip of coffee. And I realized I've been a terrible son. His voice fractured. The worst son imaginable. Yes, I said simply, without embellishment. You have been. He seemed surprised by my blunt honesty. But David, I continued, setting down my cup carefully, I didn't come here seeking an apology. I didn't come here hoping you would finally see what you've done. I came because Fiona invited me, and foolishly, I thought maybe things would be different. They can be, he said quickly, desperately. We can change. I can change. Why? I asked directly. Because now you know I have money. Because you realize there might be an inheritance to lose. No, he protested, but doubt flickered visibly in his eyes. Because you're my mother. I've always been your mother, David. That fundamental fact didn't change yesterday. What changed was your perception of what I can offer you materially. He remained silent, unable to deny the truth. I stood from the table, leaving enough cash to cover the bill even though I knew payment wasn't necessary. I'm returning home tomorrow. You can remain here for the rest of the week. It's already paid for. Consider it my final gift as a mother. Final. His voice trembled with genuine fear. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I slung my handbag over my shoulder. I don't want your money returned, and I don't want your empty apologies. I simply want peace. And that peace does not include continuing to be treated as a second-class citizen in my own family. I left him sitting there, his head cradled in his hands, but I knew this wasn't over. It's never that simple with family. I spent the remainder of the morning at the resort spa. I received a massage, a facial treatment, and sat in the sauna, allowing the intense heat to sweat out years of accumulated tension. The staff treated me with a deference that would have previously made me uncomfortable. But now I simply accepted it. I was part owner of this establishment. I had invested my money wisely when others assumed I knew how to do nothing but cook and clean. I was in the relaxation room, wrapped in a luxuriously soft robe and sipping herbal tea, when one of the spa employees approached with an awkward expression. Mrs. Thornton, please excuse the interruption. There's a very insistent woman at reception asking for you. She claims to be family. I sighed deeply. Tell her I'm unavailable. The employee nodded and withdrew quickly. I closed my eyes, attempting to reclaim some of the peace I had felt moments before. But 5 minutes later, my cell phone started ringing. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I answered out of pure curiosity. Hello, Brenda. It was Fiona, of course. I'm in the lobby. We need to talk immediately. I'm busy. I don't care what you're busy with. Come down now, or I'll come up myself. Something in her tone, that air of authority she had always employed with me, ignited something deep inside me. If you attempt to come to my suite, I will call security without hesitation. Silence on the other end. Then, in a more controlled but still tense voice, please, just 5 minutes. I considered disconnecting, but there was something different in her voice, something I hadn't heard before. It wasn't the demanding, confident Fiona I knew. There was a nuance of desperation. The lounge adjacent to the lobby, I said finally. 5 minutes. Not 1 second more. I dressed unhurriedly, taking my time deliberately. If Fiona was going to demand my presence, she could wait. I descended 15 minutes later. I found her sitting rigidly on one of the leather sofas, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. When she saw me, she immediately stood. She wasn't wearing her usual perfect makeup. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her hair wasn't styled with its typical impeccable precision. She looked human, vulnerable. I sat across from her without uttering a word. You're destroying my marriage, she said abruptly, without preamble. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not doing anything. Your marriage is destroying itself. David didn't sleep last night. He stayed awake, looking through old photographs, reading old messages. He's realized. She bit her lip hard enough to leave marks. He's realized things. That you manipulated him into pushing me away? I suggested calmly. That you constructed a narrative where I was the problematic mother-in-law to justify your cruelty? I kept my voice perfectly neutral. It wasn't like that, she protested, but without real conviction. I just wanted us to be our own family, without interferences. Interferences. I repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the air. Fiona, in 15 years, I've seen you perhaps 30 times total. If that constitutes interference, I cannot imagine what absence looks like. She wrung her hands nervously. You're right. I know you're right. I've been awful to you. But you have to understand, my own mother was controlling, always meddling in my life, in my marriage. When David and I got married, I swore I wouldn't allow that to happen. So you assumed I would be identical? I asked. Yes. She said it so quietly I barely heard her. And every time you tried to get closer, I interpreted it as invasion, as control. So I pushed you away deliberately. She paused, struggling with the admission. And David let me because he trusted me, because I made him believe I was doing it for our benefit. It was the most honest confession I had ever heard from her. But it came too late. Far, far too late. And now what, Fiona? You're here to apologize because David finally opened his eyes? Or because you realized there's money you could have been enjoying all these years? Her face contorted with emotion. It's not about the money. It's not, I leaned forward slightly. Because just yesterday, you said you had canceled my room. You told me I could sleep in the garbage bin. Did you do that out of family love?